So let me start with a question for you. When you see a typical blues progression like this, should you solo using a major scale or minor scale? Well, the pro level answer is probably to blend both together at the same time, but this can seem pretty daunting even to more established players. So in this video, I want to take a simple 1-octave position just on 3 strings and show you how you can get that classier blended sound, something like this. So everything we're about to play here is based around just 1 octave of an A minor blues scale, only on the top 3 strings, starting here at the 9th fret on the G string. So on the G string, we get frets 9 and 12, that's an E and a G, then up to the B string and we get frets 10 and 13, an A and a C, and then up to the high E and we get frets 10, 11 and 12, that's a D, an E flat and an E. Now let me just comment on this E flat here. Normally in the pentatonic this wouldn't be here, but this is here as a chromatic note known as the blue note, and it's what turns the pentatonic into the blues scale. So altogether our A minor blues scale looks like this. Now you may have noticed that even though this is an A minor scale, both the start and end points are an E, not an A, and actually the A is right in the middle here at the 10th fret of the B string. Now organising the scale like this is actually really useful because it means we can target that A from either below or above. You'll also notice this is a pretty dark sounding scale. But as we're about to see, by adding just 2 more notes, we can really brighten this up and access those major tonalities as well. And what we're going to end up with is something pretty close to what some people call the BB box because of B.B. King's usage of it, but we're actually going to go a bit beyond that. And by focusing in on just this small area, we're going to develop a really deep understanding of what each note does and how it helps us access the blues sound. The first thing we can do with our A minor blues scale is add a major 6th, which would be an F sharp that we can find here at the 11th fret on the G string. Now this gives us a brighter major scale note that we can use to pivot against our root note of A here at the 10th fret on the B string. And even just playing these 2 notes together, you hear that brighter major sound coming through. But when we then combine in our minor 3rd at the 13th fret on the B string, so now we've got 11 on the G, 10 on the B and 13 on the B, these 3 notes, listen what happens. We really start to get that blending of major and minor happening. So just take a moment to play these 3 notes and try and come up with some little licks. That kind of thing. So take a listen again to the first 4 bars of my solo and see how it's all based around this major 6th, minor 3rd combination, and then I'll talk more about the bends I'm using to bring it to life. Next, let's talk about bending on this B string. And what you heard me playing there is what we call a microtonal bend, where I'm just pushing this minor 3rd here at the 13th fret, slightly sharp, to make it more palatable, because this minor 3rd really grates against the A major chord that we're playing over, so just by pushing it slightly sharp, it makes it more palatable. Now what you want to do with this one is pick the note so it sounds, and then slight push up just before you move on to the next note. Now this is really important, and probably pretty much every time you play this note you're going to give it that little microtonal bend up. You can of course also give this note a full bend up so it matches the next scale note of D, and then use that in combination with the microtonal bend. That kind of thing. Then for our last bend on this B string, let's look at where we can add in another brighter major scale note, and that's going to be here, 12th fret of the B string, which is of course a B. Now with this note we can either bend it up a full step, which gets us to a C sharp, which is the major third in the key of A. So that's going to sound really bright when we want that sound, but not particularly bluesy. Or we can do a half step bend up to the minor third of C and get that more darker bluesy sound. And with this one, I really like the sound of pre-bending it and letting it fall away like that. Really bluesy feel. Now you can either do this so that the bend is just like one note which falls down, or that there's two distinct notes there where you get the bent note, the unbent note, and then back to the root. So hear those distinct notes like that. Now with all of these bends, there's quite a lot of subtleties depending on how far you bend them or how fast or slow you go. And really, this is something you need to spend quite a bit of time experimenting with to find where the blues lies along the way. Then let's quickly look at some bends we can do on the high E string as well. So starting at the 12th fret, here we can come up a full step, which gets us to this F sharp note, which is of course our bright sounding major 6th that we originally saw an octave lower down here, but it also happens to be the major 3rd from a D chord. So when the progression moves up to that 4 chord of D, coming up to this note is going to really outline that chord change, but also bring out that brighter major sound. Also, if you want a darker sound, this note does bend up a step and a half to the flat 7 up there, but do this at your own risk because many an E string has been snapped with this type of bend, but we'll see more of this one later. Then we can also bend on this D here at the 10th fret. Now normally when you're playing in A minor, you're used to bending a D up to an E like that, but where this falls on the first finger, doing a full step bend to an E is pretty challenging. So I prefer to use this as a half step bend, which gets us up to the blue note of E flat there. And it's a pretty cool technique just to bring in that extra blue note flavour. Back to the solo, and hear how that full bend at the 12th fret to the major 6th really brightens things up over the 4 chord, but then that blue note bend at the 10th adds a darker colour. Now something I really like to do in this position is a chromatic walk up over the blue note while still maintaining that brighter major sound. This is something piano players do all the time, and on the guitar we could do it like this. So what I'm doing there is, really we're starting here at the C sharp, but I'm going to bend up to it from 12th fret of the B string. So that's our first note in the chromatic progression. And then 10, 11, the blue note, and then up to 12 on the high E. So we've got that chromatic walk up. And then to come down, I come back down via the minor 3rd back to the root, so I can either bend off that minor 3rd with the half step bend down, or could do the little microtonal bend up either. So, or I just really love that lick and use it all the time in this position. Then let's look at some double stops, starting with this one. So what we've got here is 12th fret on the high E, together with 13th on the B, and then that note on the B string, we can just push that up a bit. We can either go so it gets to the C sharp, so we get this major 3rd, which is perfectly in tune over the A chord, or for blues, we want to be looking for some in-between sounds, which is much more gnarly. Then coming down to the 10th fret and making a little bar on these top 2 strings together. Now this is obviously part of a D chord, so it's going to work great over the 4 chord, and then we can use these other notes on the B string. Now this is the same as these notes when we do this, so of course you could do that rhythm, but there's lots of different rhythms you can use with that to get really cool sounding things over the 4 chord. then lastly, let's talk about minor blues licks, because even though we focused on how to blend in those brighter major sounds, it's still perfectly valid to hit that all-out minor sound for some variation. One great thing about this position is it gives us really easy access to this blue note at the 11th fret on the high E. It's really easy to hammer on and pull off of that, and for that reason you'll often see people using this in faster repeating licks, you know, that kind of thing. In my solo though, I just kept it really simple and just flicked off of it like that into that double stop, and then you'll see there I'm using this flat 7, the G at the 12th fret on the G string as the pivot to return back to the root note, rather than we used the F sharp when we wanted the major sound. So the more major sound was that, but just by coming back to use the G as part of the A minor blues scale really brings out that minor flavour. So I hope that was useful, and if you want more, then I recommend watching this video next, which talks about how to blend major and minor from the more traditional pentatonic position.